Headlines of the hour. Ethiopian ambassador to Paris, Enoch Tafarra, drops the concern of the Sudan and Egypt over GERD misplaced. Hello and welcome to this news hour. I am Daniel Kasahun with the news. Members of the TPLF junta who have been operating in 8 areas have been destroyed, said Lieutenant General Bacha Dabali. Briefing journalists yesterday about the current situation of the fighting in Tigray, Bacha said the Ethiopian government used its full capacity to destroy the clique once and for all. The operation, it said, has quashed the clique's attempt to reorganize and fight back. TPLF is a lost cause now, said Bacha, adding that many of its militias and those youngsters who have been deceived by the clique to fight along with it have been surrendered with their armaments. Regarding the border disputes with Sudan, Bacha affirmed that Ethiopia has no intention to go to war with Sudan. The matter can be settled through negotiation. But if wars comes to worst, the Ethiopian Defense Force is always ready to defend its sovereignty, Bacha underlined. Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Foreign Affairs Demeka Mekonnen and Minister of Water, Irrigation and Energy Sleshi Bekele briefed African ambassadors in Addis Ababa regarding the African Union-led trilateral ministerial meeting between Ethiopia, Egypt and Sudan on GERD. In the briefing, the two ministers highlighted the issues discussed at the Kinshasa meeting and Ethiopia's perspective on the matter. Ethiopia strongly believes that the African Union-led trilateral negotiation is the only viable way to reach a win-win outcome. The ministers stressed that cooperation and the spirit of African brotherhood are the best option for the management and utilization of the waters of the Nile. Demeka has expressed his disappointment on attempts of Egypt and the Sudan, who claim the GERD as a threat to Arab water security, while all riparian countries are Africans, including Egypt and the Sudan. Therefore, the minister emphasized that such polarization is not acceptable and encouraged the diplomats not to fall into these traps. The ministers underlined that in line with the communique issued at the conclusion of the meeting of the African Union Bureau of the Assembly in July 2020, the most practical and workable way for a successful negotiation is first to agree on the first filling and related operation and then to proceed to a comprehensive agreement on the utilization of the waters of the Nile. The ambassadors, on their part, expressed their profound thanks for the briefing and emphasized the importance of reaching a win-win outcome on the GERD through the African Union-led negotiation based on the principle of African solutions to African problems. They further appreciated Ethiopia's determination to resolve the Ethiopia-Sudan boundary issue peacefully. This is this news hour. The Ethiopian ambassador to France, Enoch Tafarra, told France 24 that heightened concerns of Egypt and Sudan over GERD are misplaced since the dam does not affect the flow of water. Expressing Ethiopia's firm position in settling the matter with the African Union-led negotiations, Ambassador Enoch delineated that Completing the dam is a matter of life and death for Ethiopia. Stayo Tamrat has more.
It has been a decade since Ethiopia started the construction of its Grand Renaissance Dam on the Abai River. Following the commencement of the East Africa's mega hydropower dam project, the hydropolitics of the Horn region has progressively mounted, and there have been a decade-long negotiation among the three countries, Ethiopia, Egypt and Sudan. Even the recent negotiation effort by the AU has borne no fruits, owing to a new proposal from Egypt and Sudan. In relation with this, Ethiopian ambassador to Paris, Henok Tefera, told France 24 that completing the GERD is a matter of life and days for Ethiopia.
We agree so much so that Ethiopia, which generates about 86% of the Nile waters, currently benefits from zero drop of water. For us, it's a matter of life and death. 65 million people in Ethiopia, that's approximately the population of France, have no access to electricity. This situation cannot go on. So as a matter of survival, we believe a win-win solution is possible, and that can benefit not just Ethiopia, but the region, all the riparian countries as a whole.
The ambassador hopes that the EU-led negotiation can bring a win-win solution to the dispute if all parties have good faith.
We are confident that through negotiation, a win-win solution can be found. We have an AU-African Union-led process that is in place. We believe that this dam, which is built solely to generate electricity, meaning it will not retain any water except for the period of filling the reservoir. This dam will benefit not only Ethiopia, it will also benefit the Sudan, it will also benefit Egypt. So really, we feel that the concerns are misplaced. We can all benefit from it. I think that what has to be understood is that this dam is meant to generate electricity, and electricity alone. So the flow of the water will not be affected.
The heightened concerns of Egypt and Sudan are unjustifiable because most of the technical issues have been resolved, the ambassador noted. Ethiopia has come a long way to satisfy most concerns of Sudan and Egypt during the negotiations, he added.
I think all the technical issues can be resolved, and most of it actually has been resolved when the dam is filled, during which period it is filled. We have gone to great lengths to satisfy many of the concerns of our Egyptian and Sudanese brothers and sisters. Therefore, I don't think that the hype and the heightened concerns are really justified. We can come up with a solution that can satisfy all of us. And again, what we are trying to change is a historical injustice whereby we, Ethiopia, generating 86% of the water, using none of it, are asking and are going to use it to satisfy our basic needs, our basic development needs. Ethiopians have the right to live decently, just like our brothers in Egypt and our brothers in the Sudan.
Ethiopia is currently preparing for the second phase reservoir filling of GERD, which has seen over 79% completion.
Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov unequivocally pointed out that the issue of GERD should be resolved amicably through dialogue. In a joint press briefing he gave with Egyptian counterpart Sami Shukri in Cairo, Lavrov said Russia wants the three countries to respect the African Union-led negotiation and settle their differences with an African solution. Kasan Chani has more from Agence Press.
In his recent visit to Cairo, Russia's Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov makes clear his country's position towards the dispute between Ethiopia, Sudan and Egypt over the Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam. During the talks, Egyptian officials tried to gain Russia's support through their naive watershed rhetoric.
Today we talked over a wide array of different questions, such as the Renaissance Dam, and I believe that the recent talks, for example, in Kinshasa, were also part of the conversation today. I listened to the opinion expressed by Mr. Lavrov, and I can tell you that for us, the issue of this dam is a national security issue. It's a priority for us. We're ready to build up consultations and talks in order to find a solution to this problem, which involves three countries, Egypt, Ethiopia, and Sudan. We have a lot of tension hanging in the air, and we need to do something with it. There should be no unilateral decisions on the part of any of the three states which could harm the interest of another or the other ones. We agreed to continue consultations. We believe Russia plays a key role here because Russia is one of the permanent members of the UN Security Council.
Addressing the issue, Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov unequivocally pointed out that the disparity over the Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam's construction should be settled through the African Union-led negotiation.
As for the dam in Ethiopia, our Egyptian friends have raised this issue for a long time. We are sincerely interested in the resolution of this issue, but it can only be made if all the three countries come together. The other countries need to set up the right environment for this. Our leadership offered technical examination, particularly space satellite image. We have handed over these footage. The US and the EU and the UN and the African Union were invited as advisors. The African Union is very important. All the three stakeholders are part of the African Union, and there's a great African tradition. It's the Africans that decide their issues and shape the future. On this and many other issues, including conflicts in Africa, we fully endorse this principle: African solutions to African issues.
It is to be recalled that Ethiopia invited the two countries to nominate dam operators for data sharing before the second filling of the dam, though they declined to accept. Ethiopia firmly declared that the second filling is imminent in the coming rainy season.
Belgium has provided €4 million to people who are currently in need of humanitarian aid in the Tigray regional state. The funding will be used for the International Red Cross Committee's project focusing on protection of people affected following the law enforcement operation conducted in the region. Special attention will be paid to victims of sexual violence, this according to the Minister of Foreign Affairs of Belgium. Lots of famous faces are getting involved in a campaign to help save a special forest in Ethiopia. The Future Forest Appeal by the charity Trade aims to provide communities living in the town of Matama, located in the northwest of Ethiopia, with the tools needed to restore around 10,000 hectares of degraded forests. Much of the land in the area has become infertile and unsuitable for growing crops, trees, and disappearing. Temperatures have risen and desert-like conditions are spreading. Celebrities including wildlife expert and conservationist Chris Packham and actress Joanna Lumley and Zoe Wanamaker have also shown their support for the appeal. The Matama forest in Ethiopia is made up of boswellia tree. They are known for producing a substance called frankincense, which is a precious tree resin that's used in essential oils around the world. Without the necessary action being taken, it's believed the forest could become extinct in 20 years, negatively impacting the people living in the Sahel region. The Future Forest Project is part of the wider Great Green Wall campaign, which is looking to restore 1,000 kilometers, which is equivalent to about 5,000 miles of land across the continent of Africa.
ናፈቀኝ ሲመሽ መዞሩ ድሬ ናፈቀኝ ሲመሽ መዞሩ ባለጋሪ አንተ ባለ ባቡሩ ባለጋሪ ሁሉም ወጥቷል ፍቅሩን ቢያወራ
The old town is surrounded by a wall with 5 of the original gates that are kept shut from dusk to dawn.
Welcome back. You are watching Addis News Hour. A political science scholar argues that conducting election by itself cannot make a given government legitimate or democratic. Talking to ETV Language about the upcoming general election scheduled for June this year, the scholar Darren Gosei emphasized on the necessity of a true and inclusive democracy. Emmanuel Jorge reports.
General elections were supposed to be held in Ethiopia on August 29, 2020 to elect officials to the 547-seat parliament and various state councils. However, the onset of the coronavirus pandemic forced the Horn of African nation to delay the polls. A political science scholar Ndala Nuguse told ETV that conducting free and fair elections in a given country is a part of democratization process, but not the only means that makes a government legitimate and democratic.
First, we have to understand that this is not the only option so as to maximize the national interest of Ethiopia. This is part of, the advantage regarding establishing a legitimate government, but this is not the only means. So as to bring democracy, so as to bring good governance, so as to maximize the national interest of Ethiopia, election is not the only means.
Ndala elaborates with an argument that there are certain elements that should be prioritized along election in the process of consolidating democracy in Ethiopia.
We have been conducting a number of elections, you know that. But do they bring legitimacy for that government? No. Because, the previous government ignored what? The important elements, the democracy, the good governance, the inclusiveness. That government ignored that. Because of that, election did not bring legitimacy for that government, for any government. So the government, primarily, they have to work on democracy. The government should work on good governance. The government should give due attention for inclusiveness. You can see the previous government ignored how many regions? 5 regions. You see? It was not inclusive.
He took the occasion to warn all actors not to play into the hands of conspirators who want to take advantage of the election for what he called their evil wish.
Ethiopians should be considered. Some adversaries may use this election process for their own selfish interest. So all individuals, all Ethiopians, including political parties, they have to be conscious not to allow this. National interest is the red line for Ethiopians. So all Ethiopians, all political parties cannot be against the national interest of Ethiopia.
This year's poll will take place across the country except in Tigray, where the relief and rebuilding process is still progressing. Moreover, the elections for 23 parliament seats in Addis Ababa and the 138 member state council will take place a week after the general poll.
Intellectuals are urged to exert more efforts to raise the awareness of the youth to actively play in the upcoming national election. አሉላ ተክለማርያም አዝማው
Intellectuals have a irreplaceable role in the democratization process and conducting peaceful election. It is thus expected its role to contribute share in raising public awareness about election processes.
ምርጫ ውጤቱ ምንም ሆነ ምንም ሂደቱ በራሱ
Taking part in the election process is one of the most important measures of a democratic election. So whatever the result could be, it is mandatory to take part in the election. Therefore, the intellectuals are mandated to inform and teach the people on the importance of voting.
ምርጫ ላይ መሳተፍ በራሱ
Meanwhile, Johannes Bekele from Addis Ababa University shares the immutable role of scholars in the nation-building development, calling intellectuals to augment efforts in doing so.
አገሪቱ ወሳኝ ሁኔታ ላይ ነው ያለችው ወቅት ላይ ነው ያለችው በአንድ በኩል የሀገራችን የሰላም ሁኔታ አለ በአንድ በኩል ደግሞ ምርጫ አለ
Ethiopia is currently at a very crucial stage where there is security issue on one hand and election on the other hand. Intellectuals are thus needed now than ever to contribute role in the democratization process. We should underscore that there is no ethnicity and tribe in the absence of a country. Intellectuals need to skip such things and involve in a constructive initiatives that deserve the titles they hold.
In the meantime, it is also suggested to consider the youth group when one thinks of a nation-building process.
ለወጣቱ ለዛሬ ብቻ ሳይሆን ለነገ ጭምር የሚሆነውን እይታ ነው የምትሰጠው
It is important to build the youth group in a rational way that helps them contribute their role in building their nation. The youth groups have to be allowed to exercise their rights. One has not to decide on how the youth should act in the case of nation-building efforts.
The scholars approached by TV called upon Ethiopians to actively participate in the upcoming general election.
So I will show you around the camp a little bit. Cars around one lion. Sometimes there were like 4 cars at one spot. Sometimes you were totally alone. For example, when we saw a rhino, we were like alone in the jungle. So we were totally happy we did this tour, and I think the price is all right, as you get like 3 nights of accommodation, you have food, you have the tour guide, and you also have the entrance fee for the park.
I know, so close.
Yeah, they're crossing the road.
Cross it.
Welcome back. You are watching this news hour. Moving to the news from across the continent, Somalia's lower house of parliament voted on Monday to extend the president's term by 2 years. 149 legislators backed the proposal. The resolution also ordered the Election Commission of Somalia to hold new elections in under 2 years. Under Somalia law, the proposal has to be voted on by the upper house of parliament. President Farmaajo welcomes parliament's decision to return power to the Somali people, the presidency said in a tweet in Somali. The latest round of talks to resolve Somalia's election impasse collapsed last Wednesday. The federal government blamed leaders of Puntland and Jubaland regional governments for the failure. President Mohamed Abdullahi Farmaajo's term officially ended on February 8. Monday's development is likely to be rejected by the opposition, which has accused Farmaajo of deliberately frustrating the election process to extend his role. The poll deadlock has plunged Somalia into a political crisis. There is concern that terrorist groups Al-Shabaab might exploit the disagreement to further undermine the already fragile security of the Horn of Africa. Finally, the Africa CDC Director Johan Kasango says Africa needs to develop the capacity to produce COVID-19 vaccines on the continent. According to the director, only 5 African countries appear to have the capacity to produce COVID-19 vaccines. Haptam Shagre presents Citizens File.
Senegal, Tunisia, Morocco, Egypt and South Africa are at different levels of preparedness to produce COVID-19 vaccine.
So it's investment, building capacity, having technologies, and also the right skill set. Those are all the ingredients that you require to manufacture vaccines on the continent. They're rather scarce on the continent.
The right skills are critical to achieving this, and that includes having a suitable pharmaceutical environment.
So you need to have the universities that can give you the basic skills, but you need to also have a pharmaceutical environment from which you can also attract others.
There are several African pharmaceutical companies that have already had early successes. South African-based Aspen Pharmacare has clinched the deal to produce 300 million doses of the Johnson & Johnson vaccine in its Eastern Cape facility over the next 12 months.
You require significant capability around sterile manufacturing and sterile capability. It's not an easy capability. It's a rather complex one. And as we've seen now with the advent of the pandemic, a much sought after capability around the world.
Another South African operation has also had some success. It started with importing, moved into packaging, labeling, and formulation.
What we're trying to do with Immunity Bio is to plug that gap where BioVac can be able to manufacture from scratch vaccines, the first of which would be a COVID-19 vaccine. So we'll have to build that capacity, and that is the nature of the transaction that we announced.
The continent's skill deficit still poses a challenge.
The continent is a net importer of medicines and vaccines. And unless there's a properly implemented coherent strategy to support local manufacture, which there isn't at this point in time, across the entirety of the continent, unless you get that right, then it becomes very difficult to establish sustainable manufacturing capacity on the continent.
A reminder of the headlines. Ethiopian ambassador to Paris, Enoch Tafara, dubs the concern of Sudan and Egypt over GERD misplaced. Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov tells Egypt not to undermine African Union-led negotiations on GERD. That's all for this edition. Thank you for watching. Goodbye and stay safe.